And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska aviation weather outlook on this Saturday, October 4th, 2025. And by Sunday morning, low pressure that's up here across the northwestern quadrant of the Bering Sea has a front that's pushed inland to the western southwest interior, working its way up into south central areas. And there is a steady stream of milder, moist air going northward. Extensive IFR conditions Sunday morning across the central western Gulf, eastern Kenai down the east side and southern areas of Kodiak Island, areas along the Alaska Range. Also some IFR conditions up there around Chilkoot and White Passes, the north end of the Panhandle around Haines. And then along and south of the Brooks Range, between there and the Yukon River and into the Seward Peninsula. For Sunday afternoon, we find moisture, rain areas, lower cloud cover, some fog spreading east-southeastward along the Gulf Coast. So extensive IFR conditions there, and then also parts of the especially central western Alaska Range in through some of the passes such as Rainy and Lake Clark Merrill. And then up here again along the spine of the Brooks Range and south slopes, extensive IFR conditions there for Sunday afternoon because there, as I said, milder moist air streaming northward. So that's going to facilitate those lower ceilings and potentially some precipitation as that frontal system continues to work its way eastward. On Monday morning, we still have IFR conditions along the Gulf Coast from parts of the Kenai, north end of Prince William Sound through Yakutat, northern half the Panhandle, outer coast, Sitka down to off of Prince of Wales Island. Extensive IFR conditions Monday morning along the Brooks Range and south toward the Yukon River, back into the higher terrain around the Seward Peninsula there north of Golovin and northeast of Nome. And then also up there along the North Slope and Arctic coast between Point Lay on over toward Dead Horse. And on Monday afternoon, we find some IFR conditions along the intercoastal mountains there of the Panhandle with British Columbia, otherwise MVFR conditions throughout the Panhandle and along the Gulf Coast all the way back into Prince William Sound. Extensive IFR conditions north of the Yukon River up through the Brooks Range, North Slope, and all along the Arctic coast. And then extending back toward the southwest, we have IFR conditions coming into the YK Deltas, Nunavik Island, out toward St. Matthew, as there's going to be a parade of some weaker low pressures working their way eastward early in the week. So Adigan Pass and Anatuvik Pass on Sunday will be generally IFR there. And then as we go further south, the west arm of the Alaska Range, generally Lake Clark, Merrill, on up through Rainy Pass will hold on to IFR conditions on Sunday. Windy Pass may have MVFR conditions early Sunday, giving way to IFR conditions. And then out over Isabel Pass, generally MVFR becoming VFR, though in areas west of the pass will be IFR in the morning, giving way to MVFR. In Metasta Pass, the air is a little drier further east, so generally VFR conditions through Metasta Pass, but as you fly south into the Copper River Basin, more in the way of MVFR conditions. Tanita Pass, generally MVFR on Sunday. Portage Pass, at least the east half into Prince William Sound, IFR conditions will prevail with MVFR conditions toward the west entrance. And finally up there in the north end of the Panhandle, Chilkoot and White will see IFR conditions on Sunday. So most notably, we were talking about this warm, moist, steady flow of air coming northward, and we can see it reflected in the freezing levels. At the surface, we find temperatures above freezing have pushed up across the Chukchi Sea, all the way up through the Lisburn Peninsula. And then as we go up in height, we find freezing levels along the North Slope, Brooks Range 6,000 feet, rising to 8,000 feet, Alaska Range 10,000 feet as we get up into the southwest portion of the Yukon Territory, and at 10,000 to nearly 12,000 feet out over the lower Gulf and up toward the southern Panhandle. So there's this feed of warmer, moist air coming northward associated with low pressure that's back out here over the northwest quadrant of the Bering Sea, and a frontal system arcing out ahead of it. And there's going to be a secondary low come up out of the North Pacific up toward Bristol Bay, north end of the Alaska Peninsula as we head into later Sunday and Monday. So as a result, any precipitation along this frontal boundary as it works its way eastward, we're going to find areas of moderate icing out through the west central interior, generally above 8,000 and 10,000 feet in those thicker precipitation-bearing clouds. And then as we get down along areas of south central and along the Gulf Coast, freezing levels quite high where icing will have to likely be encountered higher up at above 12,000 feet. And then back out toward the far western Aleutians, there's a pocket of cooler air aloft, but out there toward Shemya, west of Kiska, Shemya, above 6,000 feet, there could be some isolated to moderate icing. So here we see in the jet stream level 30,000 feet, broad trough over the northern and southeast area of the Bering Sea. So there's that trough. And then we have ridging that's down in the North Pacific south of Haida Gwaii. And you see the wave pattern in the upper atmosphere. 130 knot jet max, northwesterly jet max into central Canada. We have a southwest jet max of 95 knots coming up into the Gulf east of and south of Kodiak Island. And then back out here to the west, there's another jet max over 105 knots approaching the western Aleutians. At 9,000 feet or 700 millibars, there's this belt of stronger winds that run from the western Aleutians all the way through the area just below the Gulf and then back up into the Panhandle into the lower Yukon, British Columbia. And so these winds, strongest pocket 75 knots out here just southwest near the western Aleutians. And then as we get out to the Gulf, south of the Gulf, there's winds of 50 to 65 knots from the southwest associated with this wave, the secondary wave of low pressure. And then we have winds up over the British Columbia and northern Panhandle, southern Yukon, 50 to 60 knots. And finally, at 3,000 feet, you see that belt of winds that extends out over the Gulf, 35 to 40 knots, a pocket of 50 knot winds southwest of Kodiak Island and to the east there of Sand Point, and then back out across the lower Bering Sea and through the Aleutian chain. Winds generally on the order of 40 to 50 knots, though there are some stronger winds just to the west-southwest of, say, Shemya and Attu that are as high as 75 knots. So, of course, this is going to lead to extensive turbulence along the Aleutian chain. Surface to 3,000 feet as we get out further eastward toward the western Gulf. We find surface to 5,000 foot along with some low-level wind shear because we have this frontal system pushing its way eastward across that area of the Gulf. As we get up the Alaska Range, there's going to be turbulence around the ridge lines and through the gaps, so easily surface to 12,000 feet. There will be moderate to potentially isolated severe turbulence. And then back out across areas of the western interior near and east of Kotzebue Sound, surface to 4,000 feet. There could also be some low-level wind shear back toward St. Lawrence Island during the day on Sunday.